I'd like to call to order the San Bernardino County Planning Commission regular meeting of June 19th, 2013. Can everyone please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? Red and blue. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I want to make a couple of announcements before the meeting start. First of all, it's with a heavy heart. We want to inform the Commission and the public that Art Bliss passed away over the weekend suddenly. So our senior engineer. So we're going to be struggling for a little while with that, but we wanted to acknowledge all the great work he's done for the county in the last five plus years and with this Commission. Also, under the announcements, I did hand out a flyer. There's a community meeting on Monday, June 24th at Calaveras Elementary School regarding a new affordable apartment complex at 890 Buena Vista Road. This is something that, if it gets this far, will come before the Planning Commission, so you may be interested in checking it out. You're certainly all invited. Also under announcements, I wanted to let the Commission know that the oil ordinance was approved. Our new oil well ordinance has been approved. It goes into effect 30 days from the date of adoption, which would be 30 days from Tuesday. And that the Board of Supervisors also upheld denied the appeal on the Citadel project and upheld the Commission's decision on that one. So they're going to move forward. So that's the extent of my announcements today.
Okay. In respect for Art, I'd like to just maybe do a moment of silence for Art Bliss. Okay. Thank you. I'd like to open up the public comment. This is the portion of the meeting where members of the audience can come up and speak on an item that's not on the agenda. If you do so, we need you to fill out a speaker card, and we will limit your presentations to 3 minutes. Do I have any speaker cards? Is there anyone in the audience which would like to talk on the public comment? I see none, so we will close the public comment and now go to a consent agenda. We have 3 items.
Mr. Chair, I move that we approve items 1, 2, and 3 on the consent agenda.
Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
I second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Now reclamation of 3075.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Item number 4 is an amendment to a reclamation plan. Granite Rock is requesting approval of an interim management plan, also known as an IMP, for the Harris Quarry, which is located within the boundaries of the Hollister Hills vehicular recreation area. The purpose of the IMP is to provide conditions and recommendations in conformance with the State Mining and Geology Board's Surface Mining and Reclamation Act requirements, SMARA requirements, for the mine while it is idle. So pursuant to our local county code and the SMARA regulations, this IMP has to be approved by the Planning Commission and subsequently reviewed by the Department of Conservation, Office of Mine and Reclamation. They have received and commented on it and are awaiting the Commission's decision on it. Staff recommends the Planning Commission approve the interim management plan and with the CEQA findings and conditions of approval found in the staff report.
Okay, thank you. Any questions from the Commission at this point? Do we have any speaker cards? Okay. Does anybody in the audience wish to speak on this topic?
My name is Jim West of Granite Rock. I want to introduce Aaron Johnson. He's Vice President of Environmental Safety and Quality Control. And he can answer any questions you have on this project.
Thank you, Commission. I'd rather be here on a mine expansion and not a mine idling, but I'll entertain any questions you have.
Any questions from the Commission? Okay. So what's the pleasure of the Commission?
I'll make a motion, Mr. Chairman, that we approve the interim management plan of Granite Rock with the CEQA findings and the conditions of approval as set forth in the staff report.
Thank you. I have a motion. Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Use permit 107413.
Okay, this item, use permit 1074-13, being brought forward by T-Mobile. T-Mobile is proposing to add 2 new 4-foot microwave antenna dishes. One is to be placed 16 feet above the ground, and the other 18 feet above the ground on an existing 60-foot tree pole communication tower. There's no ground equipment that's proposed as part of the project, and we have attachments showing visual representations in your packet. Let's see. This is located on the what's commonly known as Hilden Hilltop, above Ridgemark, where the water towers are. There's existing tree poles up there now, and we've processed amendments to those poles over the course of the last few years. Planning staff has reviewed the proposal and finds that it's consistent with similar approved projects. Staff recommends that the Planning Commission find that the project is exempt from CEQA pursuant to Section 15303 and approve use permit 1074-13 with the findings and conditions of approval found in the staff report. And I'm available for any questions that you might have on anything in the staff report.
Any questions, Commission, before we put it up public? I see none. Anyone in the audience want to talk on this topic? Okay. We'll close the public comment. Commission, what's the pleasure?
Mr. Chair, I move that we find the project exempt from CEQA pursuant to Section 15303 and approve use permit 1074-13 with findings and conditions.
Okay. We have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Use permit, I guess it's 920-05.
Yes, use permit 920-05, similar proposal as the last one, same location. AT&T, in this case, is proposing to add 1 new 6-foot microwave antenna 37 feet above the ground on an existing 55-foot monopine communication tower. There's no new ground equipment again on this project, and there's attachments showing the visual representations. Planning staff has reviewed the proposal and finds that it's consistent with similar approved projects. Planning staff recommends that the Planning Commission find the project exempt from CEQA pursuant to 1503 and approve use permit 920-05A with the findings and conditions of approval found in the staff report. Available for any questions if you have any questions about any of the items in the staff report.
Thank you. Commission, any questions at this time?
I had one question, Mr. Chairman. Byron, this doesn't have to do with this one in particular, but with all of these cell phone applications, is there a county ordinance that's requiring cell phone companies to use a tree-type design, or are they just choosing to do that?
Historically, this commission has required it, even when it wasn't proposed. I don't believe there's a requirement specifically for trees, but we do require it to be camouflaged in some form. There's windmills, also located on water towers. But I can remember at least 2 scenarios where the company was not interested in doing a tree, and this commission required it, including this site here, as well as one out off of Buena Vista Road.
But that's just pursuant to precedent, not there's no county ordinance that does that.
I'm looking at 7.11.007, and I'm just reviewing it right now, but it talks about all proposed telecommunication facilities shall be located as to minimize their visual impact, and it has several provisions in here, and one of them is that the applicants are encouraged to consider providing architectural treatments and to use stealth techniques to reduce potential visual impacts for all telecommunication facilities, especially for those proposed in areas easily visible from major traffic corridors. And then it goes, or in residential areas or commercial centers, stealth techniques can be required as conditions of approval when determined to be necessary to mitigate adverse visual impact.
Okay. There you go. Well, I just wanted to state that I think they look terrific as a tree as opposed to some big ugly tower, so it looks good.
Any other questions? Any public comment?
Good evening. My name is Jeff Leonard. I'm a contractor representative for AT&T. Do you need my address? It's on the speaker card.
It's fun.
Okay. I'm just here to answer any questions. And also, I didn't get a copy of the staff report, so I just want to make sure there's no unusual conditions of approval.
Sorry about that. There's nothing unique with all yours, but go ahead and give it also.
Any questions for the speaker? Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else in the audience like to just talk on this topic? I don't see any, so I'll close public comment. What's the pleasure of the commission?
I move that we find the project exempt from CEQA pursuant to Section 15303 and approve the use permit 920-05A with the findings and conditions of approval by staff.
Okay, I got a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Variance 1335.
Good evening, Mr. Chair and Commissioners. Michael Kelly, Associate Planner, to talk about variance 1335. And this project proposes a 1,920 square foot barn, 20 feet tall, in a location that is, as the zoning code is written, it's not strictly permitted, but there are said to be special circumstances applying to this property. And in the staff report, I describe these special circumstances and to what degree they satisfy the requirements of the variance and the rules for granting a variance. And as I say in the staff report, variance is to be given when there is a special circumstance depriving property use available to other similar properties in the vicinity, and that it shall not be given as a special privilege, and that it's only to be approved in cases of unnecessary hardship, and also to be loosening the rules only to the extent necessary to allow that enjoyment of the property. And as I said in the staff report, it meets some but not all of those criteria, and the main thing that is not in line with the criteria is that it's not, there is available place to place this that is, well, it's located directly in front of the main residence, which is not permitted under the zoning for this property. And there's a spot located elsewhere on the property that is available not directly in front of the main residence, not perfectly in line with the zoning ordinance, but but it is something that staff believes could be appropriate for a variance. And the special circumstance here, as I say in the staff report, is the fact that the house was built all the way to the back at a time before the before this ordinance existed, that these types of structures could not be allowed in front of a residence. And the owner at the time could not have known that, of course. So this is why staff thinks that that part of the variance is potentially justified. And so basically, in short, staff recommends that the proposal as provided be not approved, but that an alternate location may be approved with the findings and conditions found in the staff report. The alternate location, I had a graphic, but I don't see, the computer is not set up, and I had it on a PowerPoint, so I don't quite, it's not quite practical to set that up right now. I don't have a paper copy. But it's basically directly opposite the driveway from the location that's proposed in the staff report. So if you were to draw that on the other side and just a little bit away from the slope, That is what the applicant has proposed as an alternate location, and staff believes that's sufficient for granting the variance. Given that, given the character of the neighborhood and the other sorts of uses that are on the other properties, given that these are similar uses that are on the other properties, albeit not necessarily buildings in the same location as proposed. So as I said, staff recommends that that may be approved with the findings and conditions of approval, and also that it be considered exempt from CEQA under Class 3 of categorical exemptions.
Just for me, what's the purpose of not having it in front of the house?
Pardon?
What's the purpose for not allowing it in front of the house?
To not allow it in front of the house, I'm not sure just what the rationale was for writing that into the ordinance, but it does say specifically in the ordinance for accessory buildings that that accessory buildings be not allowed to be directly in front of, well, not directly in front of the main residence on a property, unless it's deemed to be a viable agricultural use, in which case it has some other special privileges.
Now, is there other houses in the area that has it in front of the home?
Yeah.
There are,
On A, your attachment A, circled one.
Right.
oh yeah,
He's an
Okay,
old cop.
got it.
You should know him.
Pardon?
He's an old cop, lives there.
Oh.
Yeah.
so
Provost.
Oh.
Yeah.
So page 3 has a list of other properties that, it's not an exhaustive list of other properties in the area, but it's a list of properties that have been provided by the applicant in the pictures that are in the attachments. And I took a look at these and pulled out various records on these. And none of the accessory buildings are directly in front of a residence, with the exception of a senior second, which is kind of an accessory senior dwelling unit, which is kind of a different situation. But there are, let's see, a couple of these that are more forward, that are closer to the road than the residence, and it's kind of implied, kind of fuzzily, but kind of implied by the accessory building ordinance that accessory buildings are restricted from being even more forward than the main residence on a property in the R and the AR and the AP zones. But it's pretty explicitly stated that it's not to be directly in front.
So, Michael, question.
Mhm.
So look to your plot map, parcel number 21.
Mhm.
Have you got your plot map in front of you? The
I-
lot map?
I don't have that in front of me. But,
Okay. Well,
I'll-
parcel 21, it's actually an attachment where you took the pictures. Attachment, the first one, and it's labeled A. Do you have that?
Let's see, I don't have that in front of me, but I have the table on page 3 that says picture A, and
There's a barn in front of the house on that parcel. Now, my question...
directly in front of the house?
Well, yeah, that would be my question. So what's in front mean? Directly in front, and if you're standing directly in the middle of the lot and looking directly at the house, it stops your vision to the house? Or in front meaning anywhere in front of the house on the parcel? Because these were set up, built along ridge lines to capture view, especially along that line. I had the subdivision. So, yeah, so the whole parcel, that whole line of houses is up there on that elevation.
Yeah.
And no one went in and built that barn in there, even though it might be off to the side a little. So what happened on this one? What happened on A? And why are we picking on these guys?
Well, it's not that we're picking on these applicants, but that,
Maybe a bad word, but anyway, it's,
but the law says, I don't have it memorized, but I don't recall if I included it right in here, but it says that Let me see if I can see it here.
If I may, Mr. Chairman, rules change over time, and rules that apply 10 years ago don't always apply today. Sometimes rules show up, in this case, I believe this was 2004, 2005, for a very different planning commission, different staff today. So, who's to say that this rule might still be there in 5 years from now? But I think you've got enough information in your report to find that there are circumstances, special circumstances exist.
Yeah, I don't think that was this old, but, okay.
I see in the staff report, the actual text of the ordinance says that in front of the main dwelling on the lot are the words used to say what is prohibited, in front of the main dwelling on the lot. And I don't actually know what the story is with that residence as shown in picture A, but the way staff would interpret this rule is that to have, well, as it says, in front of the main dwelling on the lot is not allowed for accessory structures, usually. But in this case, staff report describes that 2004, this ordinance was adopted that changed the rules that were there. So even if the house were placed up at the top of that hill for the views, even on a property like this, the accessory building would be restricted from that front area of the property. But given that the owner wouldn't have known that at the time, that could constitute a situation in which it's an extraordinary situation that would allow for a slight variation through the variance.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Michael, isn't one of the findings we can make in support of a variance that would allow the construction of the barn in line with the main residence, the fact that the residence itself is elevated above the street view, so that it doesn't really matter if something's in line with it or not?
Well,
Graphic exception or finding?
I think that if I can interject, that could be something I think that the planning commission could take into account.
Seems like it makes sense. And
Yeah,
based
because
upon...
if the purpose of the statute was so that you would see the residences, and if it's up suitably high, you're still going to be able to see the residence.
Exactly.
I don't,
Problem solved. That would be my motion, just as a preview.
That's why they built the house back there, was because it was almost a river in front.
Yeah.
Any other question before I open up the public?
West side.
Yeah.
You-
Were there any comments received from the neighbors?
pardon?
Were there any comments received from neighbors?
There were not comments received from neighbors.
Okay.
Any other questions from us?
All right.
I've got a couple more. One is there's a watershed that actually goes through this area, and then there's a downward swell area that's sort of a non-build area. It starts from parcel 18 and goes on down to maybe 20. It might go through 19. That's the only other thing I'd be concerned about constructing in that sort of low area.
Looking at this, the subdivision map for this property, there are parcels across the drive that are affected by a non-buildable area. This property is not part of that.
No restrictions, okay.
Any questions from the commission? Any speaker cards?
Yes, the applicant.
Hi, good evening. I'm Eric Lindquist, the applicant. I'd like to just state that after reading Mr. Kelly's staff report on Friday and his recommendation of moving the building out of the direct line of sight, I have drawn up a new site plan showing it on the other north side of my driveway, which would eliminate the issue of being in the direct line of sight, but it would still, I guess, technically be in front of the main dwelling. And I do have a copy of that if anyone would like to see that.
Do you have a preference whether it's the south side or the north side?
honestly, I don't have a preference. The north side, as Mr. Kelly would said, would be out of the direct line of view. The reason I chose the south side of the driveway originally was because my neighbor had a barn already there, so I figured it would be better to group them together. Actually, personal preference would be on the north side that Mr. Kelly recommended.
That's what you want anyway?
That would be preferred.
Okay. Well, there you go.
Any questions for him? Any other speaker cards? Anyone in the audience wish to talk on this matter? I'll close the public comment. Commissioners, what would you like to do?
I can take a stab at a motion.
Go for it.
I make a motion that the Planning Commission grant variance 13-35 with the alternative barn site identified by Mr. Bloomquist in his comments at the podium, that is on the north side of his driveway and out of the direct line of sight between the property's main residence and nearest point along Heatherwood Estates Drive, and make this variance consistent with the findings and conditions set forth in the staff report.
Do we have a motion? Do we have a second?
I can second that.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Okay, we'll move on. Do we have any discussion items from any reports from the commission at all?
I wanted to say something about art,
Please. Yeah, just do it now.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just to follow up on your comments, Mr. Chair, at the beginning of the meeting, I was struck when I pulled up out front. I don't want to get emotional right now, but the amount of times over the years that Art Bliss was out there waiting for us, and the amount of times I know he was our friend. We worked with him closely. He was always helpful to all of us as commissioners, I know to the public and the projects. It's a huge loss. Armando, I want you to tell everybody in your department he was a good guy, and I know you know that. And we really enjoyed working with him, and he's going to be sorely missed. He was my friend.
Thank you. Any other discussions on this? Okay. Do we have a motion to adjourn for July 17th?
So move.
Okay, do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Meeting adjourned.
I knew I wouldn't be able to say that without getting too emotional.
You know what, he was